Good evening. I'm Judy Woodruff in Washington.
And I'm Robert MacNeil in New York. After the news summary this Tuesday, we look at the rising AIDS menace among American teenagers. Elizabeth Brackett talks to teens in Chicago, and we have a debate between the Bush administration, a congressional critic, and two field experts on how to make teenagers realize the risk. Then correspondent Spencer Michaels reports on the California battle over TV ads in the classroom.
Part of helping the world live and communicate better is keeping it well informed. That's why funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour is provided by AT&T and by PepsiCo. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.
Russian President Boris Yeltsin today won the parliamentary support he needs to continue his radical reforms, at least for now. The parliament gave preliminary approval to a resolution extending Yeltsin's decree-making powers for at least 3 months. Yeltsin, who didn't attend today's session, agreed to work towards softening some reforms. The compromise agreement followed several days of bickering between the parliament, dominated by hardliners, and Yeltsin's government. The U.S. and other Western nations had expressed concern over the conflict, which threatened to jeopardize a $24 billion Western aid package for Russia. In Washington today, reporters asked Secretary of State Baker to assess Yeltsin's political future.
I'm quite confident that President Yeltsin will do very well, because I think he enjoys the support of the vast majority of the Russian people. He's attempting something that is very, very courageous, trying to reform an entire system politically, socially, economically, and convert it into something very different from what it has been. And of course, he enjoys the full support of the United States in that effort.
After meeting with the Ukrainian defense minister, Baker said the U.S. would be willing to help in destroying that country's nuclear weapons. His comment followed a Ukrainian announcement in Kiev that it would resume transfers of its nuclear weapons to Russia for destruction. It halted those transfers last month, saying it wanted international guarantees that Russia would destroy the weapons. Judy?
Libya lost a legal battle today to stop United Nations sanctions. The sanctions were approved after Libya refused to cooperate with investigations into the bombings of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, and that of a French airliner. We have a report narrated by Richard Vaughan of Worldwide Television News.
The World Court in The Hague rejected Libya's attempt to block the Security Council measures, which America and Britain hope will force the surrender of 2 Libyan suspects in the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103. The sanctions will halt all air traffic to and from Libya and do not rule out military action. The white-clad Libyan representative and his Belgian lawyer absorbed what they distinctly did not wish to hear. Representatives of the Lockerbie victims savored the legal victory. The ruling pleased top U.S. officials in Washington, among them Secretary of State James Baker.
A very favorable decision, and we are delighted to see that the World Court is not going to attempt to interfere with the decisions of the United Nations Security Council, taken after solemn deliberations of the Council.
The UN sanctions go into effect against Libya tomorrow, unless it hands over suspects in the Lockerbie bombing. The U.S., Britain, and France warned Iraq today to stop all threatening military activity in Kurdish areas. Diplomats at the United Nations told the Associated Press the warning was delivered in a meeting with Iraq's UN ambassador. The complaint was over recent Iraqi missile deployments inside the Western Patrolled Security Zone north of the 36th parallel. The Allies said the deployments indicated hostile intent. They reportedly ordered Iraq to stop turning radar on Western planes in the region and to remove the missiles or face a possible military response.
Retail sales fell in March. The Commerce Department reported a 0.4% drop, the worst performance in 7 months. But that followed strong gains in January and February. Analysts said the report was evidence of the uneven pace of economic recovery. The stock market hit another new high today. The Dow Jones average closed with a gain of more than 36 points at a record 3306.13. Much of downtown Chicago remained closed today because of heavy flooding. It happened yesterday when a wall holding back the Chicago River burst into an underground tunnel system. Mayor Richard Daley said city workers knew about a hole in the wall days or even weeks ago. He said those workers would be held accountable. And today he accepted the resignation of the city's acting transportation commissioner. Many office buildings are still flooded and without electricity. The governor has declared a disaster area in order to receive federal assistance.
In Sicily, the creeping lava flow from Mount Etna has crossed the last barricades protecting a village of 7,000 people. It flattened 2 uninhabited farmhouses on the outskirts of the Sicilian village of Zafferana. Soldiers have slowed the lava flow with explosions. Tomorrow they plan to drop huge concrete blocks further up the mountain to steer the lava away from the village. That's it for the news summary. Just ahead, teens at risk and commercials in class.
We lead tonight with a look at teenagers and the AIDS epidemic. A congressional report released this week estimates that 40,000 teenagers are being infected with the HIV virus each year. But it says federal intervention to prevent teenagers from getting AIDS is a national disgrace, underfunded, uncoordinated, and largely unsuccessful. How to get the message out, and what message, for example, just how explicit it should be, has generated a major policy debate. And we'll sample that debate in a moment. We begin with this backgrounder from correspondent Elizabeth Brackett in Chicago.
AIDS is spreading unchecked among the nation's teenagers, according to the congressional report. AIDS is now found in teens in 49 states, in small towns, rural areas, and urban centers. The report says the number of teens with AIDS has increased by 70% in the past 2 years alone, making AIDS the 6th leading cause of death among youth ages 15 to 24. We gathered a group of teenagers together in a Chicago public high school, Lane Tech, to talk about AIDS. They were shocked at the numbers, but did have a fairly good understanding of what AIDS is and how it is spread.
Everybody knows about AIDS. They must know something, especially that it's transmitted through sexual intercourse. It's on the news, it's on TV, it's in school. Friends talk about it.
Ever since I found out about the disease is when I started knowing about sex, so it came at the same time.
But just as with older Americans, knowing about the disease does not necessarily mean taking action to prevent it. And a debate is now raging over the best way to convince teens to protect themselves. Last month, the Department of Health and Human Services introduced new commercials aimed at sexually active young people.
It's that all my friends are still doing what I did that got me infected. And I don't mean drugs.
But AIDS activists say these commercials are not as effective as earlier ones done by the same top New York ad agency that talked about condom use for teens. Clarissa Cunningham of the AIDS Action Council.
The reluctance of this administration and the previous one to deal with proven prevention methods, i.e. condoms, is monumental.
The Chicago teenagers didn't think much of ads for AIDS education, regardless of their content.
I don't think commercials really do it. I think this 2 minutes of telling you to do something is not enough. I think they should have programs which structure it out perfectly. 2 minutes is not enough to tell someone what's wrong and why is it wrong.
Kids in Chicago's high schools get some AIDS education in health courses their freshman, junior, and senior years. But most kids say they learned more about AIDS from their friends and from television than anywhere else.
We didn't really go over much in health. It wasn't really focused on that much.
What do you think an AIDS education course should include? Should it talk about passing out condoms, or should it just talk about abstinence?
It's only going to promote sex. It's like, hey, here's a condom, go have some fun. That's not the way it should be.
That's the argument.
I think that if you're I mean, they're going to do it anyway, so you're giving them a safer way to do it.
I think that kids should know that the best way to keep from getting AIDS is to get married and to do it with your spouse, other than doing it with just your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and just stay with that spouse for the rest of your life and not get married.
How practical do you think that is?
I don't know.
In fact, the report says that by age 20, 60% of teenage females are sexually active, and 86% of teenage males are sexually active. Yet only 47% of females and 55% of males report using condoms. The Chicago Kid said that is because teens often do not think they are in danger.
Some teenagers think that they won't get it because they're young and only old people get it or middle-aged people get it, but they're young and they won't be able to get it.
That's why I thought when Magic Johnson came out and said that he had AIDS, that was a turning point, I think, because then everybody just stopped and thought that, you know, if it happened to him, it could happen to me.
Most of you seem to know what causes AIDS. So why are more kids getting AIDS? Is it a lack of knowledge, or is it the heat of the moment?
Hormones. Probably the most basic thing. It's, what else can you say? I mean,
I've heard people say that they don't like condoms, so why use it? And they don't think that the person they're with has AIDS, so why use a condom?
They also make up excuses why they shouldn't use a condom, like, well, I know I don't have it, or I can't have it at this age. It's no way possible. I have to wait until I'm 20-something. And, you know, they just don't want to use it. They make up any excuse in the world to not use a condom.
I think a lot of people know what the risk is, and those people that don't use protection, they're playing a game with their life, and it's just like playing Russian roulette, and they know what the risk is. If they want to take it, they should be able to face what's going to happen next. I mean, it's foolish not to think that it can happen to you, because you're just another person. You're not nobody special.
The report blasted federal agencies for spending only 5% of the federal AIDS budget on programs geared to teens. Though there was dissent on the committee, 8 Republican members said what was needed was measures to promote sexual abstinence and strengthen family ties, not more government programs.
Now our debate over what kind of messages the federal government should be putting out to teenagers about AIDS. Dr. James Mason is Assistant Secretary for Health and Human Services and the head of the U.S. Public Health Service. Congresswoman Pat Schroeder is a Democrat from Colorado who chairs the Select Committee on Children, Youth, and Family, which issued this week's report. Dr. Karen Hine is the director and founder of the Adolescent AIDS Program at the Montefiore Medical Center in New York City and the author of AIDS, Trading Fear for Facts, a guide for teens. She joins us from Los Angeles, where we also find the Reverend Steve Gooden, a Christian minister based there and the founder of a group called No Compromise. He advocates abstinence as the best message for young people to stop the spread of AIDS. Congresswoman Schroeder, listening to those young people in Chicago, they seem pretty well informed to me. What is your committee's complaint about the federal government's information effort?
Well, you know, when I took over the committee, people wanted to drop the youth part of it. They like the children part, they like the family part, but nobody wants to deal with youth. And I think that's because we really have seen so much risky behavior by adolescents that as a nation we've kind of thrown up our hands like we don't know how to deal with it. That's why we call this report the Decade of Denial, because the facts are such that while even in Chicago, a very enlightened area, and we find that only 2/3 of the local community have any kind of AIDS education. I'm sure Chicago does, and with what they're subjected to in a very cosmopolitan city, I think these young people have figured out a lot more than others might. But the bottom line is, they still don't really get it, that they are very much at risk, that this is not isolated, that this is not just one little case or something. If you use IV drugs or whatever. It is out in the heterosexual young teen community, and they should be working very, very hard to protect themselves, because no one's ever recovered from AIDS. This is death.
What specifically do you want the federal government to do that it's not doing?
Well, I think we have a very high moral obligation. We should, of course, be warning young people about these statistics. That's number one, because the statistics are pretty deadly, as you heard about. But number two, we also know that while we should tell young people they were most safe if they do not engage in sex, we should also say if they aren't listening to us, we also have statistics that will tell you that condoms might protect them. It's not 100% guaranteed. That's why abstinence is a much better choice. But to deny them the information that the Center for Disease Control and others have come forward with on the use of condoms is really wrong, because we're saying because they might do something we don't morally approve of, they might go out and subject themselves to a virus that could kill them.
And you think
I don't think the government has the right to withhold
You
it.
think the federal government is denying them that information?
Yes, I see what they're saying is that we don't want to be that direct about it. We're not laying it out there on the plain choices. There's almost a fear of talking about condoms, because if you do, they think that that's saying you have a license to engage in sex. That's not what it's saying at all. I think we clearly should say don't. That's the safest way. But if you won't listen to us, at least protect yourself as much as possible with this. And somehow we just don't seem to be mature enough as a nation to say it, and I think that's very tragic.
Let's go to Dr. James Mason, the head of the Public Health Service. Is that the case, that you are reluctant to tell teenagers what the Congresswoman says they should be told?
I really wish that Congresswoman Schroeder had been kind enough to let us see a copy of her material before it was published, because I think there are many errors in it. Let me start by saying that we agree with her that the message should be postponing sexual activity until a person is older. But if they're unwilling to do that, then of course they have to be told that they ought to take the precaution of using a condom. And the America Responds to AIDS series, which is now in its 6th wave and has been going on for almost 5 years, has included over 29 either PSAs or spots that target
PSAs are public service announcements.
That's right, for television, or else brochures or posters that specifically target adolescents. Another 17 target parents and adolescent interaction. And of those PSAs, although few of them mention the condom because most television stations won't use them, in the posters, about 17 or 18 specifically talk about condoms, but they put abstinence first, postponing sexual activity, but the condom message is part of the federal government's repertoire of educational materials. We leave it to the state and the local community, the school board, to decide whether they're going to use abstinence. We think that makes a great deal of public health sense. But if they choose to use the condom brochure or the posters that relate to condoms, that's a local choice, and we feel that's where that decision ought to be made.
I believe you brought with you you gave us today an example of the kind of public service announcement that is being put out that does mention condoms. Can we show that one as an example of the sort of stuff?
Yes, would you please do that?
Tonight, Dolores had a few drinks, did some crack, and ended up another tragic story. Only she doesn't know it yet. Drugs make you forget. And if you forget how risky sex can be, you could catch the AIDS virus and not know it for months, even years. AIDS, another way drugs can kill.
Now, that one doesn't mention condoms, Dr. Mason.
No, that one does not specifically mention condoms, and as I say, most of our television material does not. We have produced a few of them that have, and they've had almost no usage.
And you say that's the fault of television stations which don't want to run them.
I think that's a problem with television stations.
Yeah.
We've put out more posters and brochures that have first encouraged abstinence, postponing sexual activity, and then if a person has decided not to do that, to use the protection, not 100% fail-safe, but avail yourself of the condom.
So your department is not squeamish about recommending the use of condoms if people won't abstain from sex?
No, we're not squeamish at all. Where I think we're getting a bum rap is that there are some community-based organizations that the Centers for Disease Control funds. And those community-based organizations have to use a local citizen board to screen material, and here we're trying to prevent material that is erotic or so negative that most people would be aghast if the federal government funded it. And that's the only limitation we have.
Congresswoman Schroeder, the doctor says they're getting a bum rap.
Well, look, first of all, there was a quote in this morning's paper from the good doctor who said that when the goals of science collide with moral and ethical judgment, there are certain times that science has to take a time out. Now, if we have science saying condoms protects lives, not 100% guarantee, but does protect lives, I think it is wrong that we are not telling communities that and saying they're not doing a good job if they don't tell people that too. As I listened to his comments, he said in the community-based organizations, they're encouraging them to do abstinence, but they're not encouraging the second part unless they ask for it. And I think they're entitled to the full range of information. Secondly, the good part of our report is we found that communities that did do that and started abstinence programs at a very young age with young people who were their peers and also followed through with the full range of information and things that we think that should be out there have worked much, much better than adults just standing there with a finger in their face saying, no, 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 don't do this, just say no because I told you so. It requires more than that, unfortunately. That's dealing with nostalgia and not reality.
Just before we move off this area, Congresswoman, a lot of the comment refers to the Bush administration. Now, there were a number of Republicans on your committee who dissented from the committee findings, and some of them because they were against explicit recommendations for the use of condoms. Is this turning into an election issue that Democrats are for condoms and Republicans are against it? Is that... I mean, is it?
Well, I think people would like to make it that. I would hope that we would not make it that. There's too high a stakes. This should not be a partisan issue at all. One of the most difficult things as a parent that I've had is dealing with my children's sexuality. And I find Dr. Mason's comments pretty amazing. The week after the Bush administration pulled back a manual that was going out to parents of people who work for the federal government telling them how to deal with their young people's sexuality. I would think parents would want help with that. I don't know of a parent in America that finds that easy. And so I guess they're trying to make it a partisan issue. I find that very sad, and I wish we would deal with the science of it rather than the morality.
Dr. Mason, how do you respond to that? It is true that a chapter in this best-selling book on rearing children was deleted that dealt with adolescent sexuality.
First of all, I can't say whether that was an individual's choice and own feelings. I would suspect that that had more to do with the individual that pulled the chapter than it was the Bush administration or any choice made by the Bush administration. Certainly within the United States Public Health Service, we're under no compelling instructions in any way to avoid telling the science facts as they are. Now, Congresswoman Schroeder quoted me, and she quoted me correctly, but I want to make it very clear that quote was in the context of such things as informed consent, making sure that if we're doing human experimentation, that we put ethical and social issues ahead of science issues, and that quote was used out of context, not by her. I don't fault her at all, but someone else who picked that up in the wrong context. And we're under no instruction. Obviously, there are a lot of us that feel that it is in the best interest of public health to deal with this problem of teenage pregnancy, sexually transmitted disease, HIV, violence. We've got problems among some of our teenagers, and you can't deal with those problems simply in the context of AIDS. We've got to look at root causes. Absolutely. But one of the most important things that we can do is to help them to postpone sexual activity. I, in no way, or no one else that I know in the public health service, are simply waiting for people to beg or ask for materials that would turn in a different direction. That's up to the local level to make that decision.
Could I ask a favor then?
Yeah.
I would hope that you would call the Bush administration and please tell them to let that booklet go out to parents. It's outrageous if it's just one person's opinion that 275,000 federal workers who are parents can't get aid from 3 doctors on how to deal with their children on these issues. So help us get that information out.
Well, we're getting that kind of information out in our Title X family planning clinics, in our maternal and child health clinics, because I think that's an important part of our responsibility.
Let me bring in our guest in Los Angeles. Dr. Hine, you've been listening to this debate as between recommending postponing or abstaining from sex. What is the right message, the effective message for teenagers from your view, and how do you get it there to them?
Well, I'm a physician, but I'm also a parent of 2 teenagers. And in fact, as we enter the 2nd decade of a world pandemic, I'm just so struck by how differently the government is handling this health emergency compared to some other adolescent problems that Dr. Mason just mentioned. As an example, if we were talking about accidents, car accidents, everybody, of course, would say that if you're going to be in a car, the best thing to do is to wear a seatbelt. And in another health issue, if we were talking about heart attacks and what's okay to eat and what's not okay, we give a balanced message between what's risk-related, in this case sexual intercourse, or with heart attacks, cholesterol-laden foods. But then we'd also talk about what's not risky. In the case of HIV, we talk about outer course, such activities as petting or masturbation or massage. These materials that the government is making available for teenagers mention neither specific explicit information on intercourse nor how to protect oneself using condoms and the explicit information and skills that are needed, nor the outer course activities that would put nobody at risk for this epidemic.
Well, but in your experience, come back to the argument again for a moment, address the argument that it is the first duty of government or teachers or other institutions to persuade teenagers to postpone sex or abstain from it.
Fine, but the first duty is not the last, and to talk about abstinence alone is denying the fact that more than half of the teenagers in this country are having sexual intercourse by middle adolescents, age 16. And currently, in what's happening with AIDS education, it has to do with DNA and RNA and viruses, but we're missing the most important point, which is behavior change, and that the behaviors start in early adolescence. Currently, the CDC guidelines for middle school do not permit the discussion of condoms. And yet, as Dr. Mason, I'm sure, would agree, the health goals for the year 2000 for our nation are to double condom use in adolescence. So we're in this very particular moment in history when we are trying to put an end to the Victorian era, and yet we're prohibited from not just the information, but the very skills and the access to those devices, in this case condoms, which actually could save lives and then would be in compliance with the very nation's goals for the year 2000 that this federal government has set for our youth.
Reverend Gooden, let's hear your views on this. You actively work with teenagers, I gather, and you preach abstinence. Do they listen to you?
Well, I would have to say, Mr. MacNeil, that I don't want to come across puritanical. I don't want to say we preach abstinence. We teach abstinence. We encourage abstinence. One of the things that shocks me in listening to Congresswoman Schroeder and the good doctor here is we revert back to the typical Democratic left-wing lingo. And excuse me for the pun of those words, but we, I think, are politicizing the issue. Congresswoman Schroeder, for her own constituency, the gay lobbyists, ACT UP, the unholy alliance with NOW, headed by Molly Yard and Planned Parenthood. The answer here is not more government intervention, more government funding, more money. The answer here is to begin to treat this thing from the grassroots, from a cultural perspective. AIDS is a disease, particularly in this country, perhaps not in Africa, but at least in America, that seems to be fueled by behavioral sexual patterns. Those patterns that are more common amongst the gay communities and those patterns that are more consistent with promiscuous heterosexual activity. I don't believe, excuse me, doctor, I don't believe that condoms should be promoted as a feasible use or deterrent from contracting the HIV virus.
Why
first
not?
Of all,
Why
well,
not?
first of all, Mr. MacNeil, because the condom was not designed as a deterrent to a virus. It was designed as a contraception. Matter of fact, I believe it's 450 times, the virus that is, 450 times smaller than a sperm. I mean, it's kind of like throwing a golf ball through a basketball hoop or putting on a pair of sandals in 30 degrees below zero weather in Utah.
If we were going to talk about culture, let's talk about the teen culture. My two kids in their high school put on a cabaret just this week. The theme was HIV, condoms, and sex. The backdrop showed Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz with her ruby shoes walking down the yellow brick road. These kids are saying that there's a generational difference, that condoms and HIV and sex, oh my, they are living in a reality now of a world pandemic. And what we as adults are going to do in this decade is going to be how we're remembered in history. If we deal with this by putting our heads in the sand and wishing that this would go away and that adolescent sexuality would go away, we're condemning this generation.
Dr. Heim,
the culture of teenagers.
Excuse me, Dr. Heim interrupted me in a very vital point, and I believe I gave her...
Yeah, Dr. Heim, look, one at a time, please. Everybody will... Dr. Heim, everybody will get a chance. Just excuse me a moment.
Have made condoms available by, in fact, using parents and teachers and kids to work together, forming these coalitions that Pat Schroeder mentioned.
Ladies and gentlemen, we won't, excuse me, we won't get anywhere if you both talk over each other. I'll give you both a chance. Just take a moment. Dr. Heim, answer his practical point that the condom is not efficient in preventing AIDS because it wasn't designed for that.
Sure. Compared to what? Compared to unprotected sexual intercourse, the condom goes a long way, not just in protecting one from HIV, but also from other sexually transmitted diseases as well as pregnancy.
If I may respond, Mr. MacNeil, I would first like to say, my dear good doctor, when you spoke, I didn't interrupt you. I would appreciate that same type of respect. Mr. MacNeil, I would just like to respond to that in reference to the condom, as I'm sure that the doctor will affirm. The purpose of the condom was not to deter a virus. It was initially for contraception. And
but how about her rebuttal point that it is more effective compared to what? Compared to nothing?
Well, definitely I would have to agree that the condom is something for nothing. But, Mr. MacNeil, we have to remember something here, and that is that the condom has a failure rate. We have to remember that the only safe sex is no sex. I don't want youth in this country, teenagers in this country. My sister, who called me from Greenville, North Carolina, and was telling me that she was struggling with her own sexual dilemma. I don't want to say to my sister, go out and play Russian roulette with a condom, because once you do, and you contract that disease, it's terminal. It means instant death.
Okay, but let me ask you another question then. The statistics show that the incidence of new HIV infection among teenagers is a greater percentage of the new infections are either black or Hispanic in proportion to their percentage in the population. And that is what you wish, but does what you advocate work? Can you actually persuade teenagers you know to abstain from sex?
Mr. MacNeil, I'm so glad you're giving me the opportunity to respond to that question. I would say to you, ask people like Josh McDowell, ask people like Dr. Stanley Monteith, who wrote this book, AIDS, the Unnecessary Epidemic. Ask people like Jane Chastain, who's the author of the book, If I Only Knew What to Say. These people are speaking to tens of thousands. I have spoke to thousands of teens around this country.
But
and
do they listen to you?
Yes, they do, Mr. MacNeil. The fact of the matter is this. The actual rate is about 50% of the teenagers in this country are practicing abstinence. It would seem to me that Congresswoman Schroeder and others like her are trying to gear our government policy to cater to that 48 or 49% who are sexually active, rather than talk about those who are giving in and giving up. Why don't we talk about those who are not giving in?
Let's ask the Congresswoman. Let's ask
Yes,
Congresswoman Shorter.
that is not what I said at all. I said there's absolutely no question you're safest if you don't do it. But there's also absolutely no question that if you're going to do it, whether I say so or not, you still should know that you could be much more apt to be protected with a condom, and every doctor and the Center for Disease Control and all federal reports and everything else say that. Now, the next thing is, but let me just finish, if you don't mind. If I took your logic to the extreme, look, I as a parent tell my children not to drink. I do not want them to drink. On the other hand, I also tell them that if they do not get in a car and do not drive. Either call me or get a friend or take a cab. Now, that is not encouraging them to drink. And I think you're getting the two mixed up. You're saying that we're gearing to the half that don't. I'm saying, look, if you're so effective, I wish they'd put you on the network every night if you really can guarantee me that kids aren't going to go out and engage in sex. But people have been preaching abstinence forever. And let me tell you, every 10 years, our adolescent pregnancy rate doubles. We see 1 out of 6 teens coming down with some kind of sexually transmitted disease every year. And so, obviously, it's not working with every one of the teens. It's a rebellious period.
What do you do, Mr. Gooden, about those who don't want to listen to you?
Well, let me say quite honestly, Mr. MacNeil, that we have to be realistic about this. I am not foolishly idealistic. Of course, you will always have a segment of society that is going to disobey the laws. You're going to have those that are not going to wear their seatbelts, Dr. Hine. You're going to have those who are going to commit murder. But we do not incarcerate the entire society, and nor do we, Congressman Schroeder, encourage our youth to go out there and put condoms on the top of our beer bottles and drink them so that we can have safe alcohol. I think that the point that we need to do is not to send a message to the youth of this country that we don't have leadership. Absolutes are still very much in effect and are very much effective.
Dr.
We
Hine,
cannot stand and give options. We have to give absolutes and tell people there's a right and there's a wrong.
Dr. Hine, what's your response to that?
What I would say is that we're all here because we care about young people. Let's bring this back to a focus of the fact that we're in the middle of a world pandemic. That for those of us who care about youth, we might look to those youth for some of the answers. And it's some of their answers which should drive then the educational programs. They are doing much better than their parents are in embracing this epidemic, not only in terms of condom use and whatever, but also in terms of a compassionate response. Just as teenagers and their idealism, the green teens are leading us in the fight for a healthier world in terms of ecology, we need to look at teenagers who are growing up in this pandemic that don't remember a time before the AIDS epidemic for what's real in their lives and what the solutions are. And what they're saying to us is that they can deal with the real facts and the skills and the access to what they need to keep themselves safe so that they will be better congresspeople and better heads of government and better doctors and better ministers. So it's this message that brings us all together. The specifics, though, are that teenagers want explicit information and they need it. And our country, unfortunately, is behind in this pandemic. That other Western industrialized nations, the Netherlands, the UK, and others that have decent sex education are doing better than we are. The age of first intercourse is the same, but the pregnancy rates and the abortion rates are much lower. So, in fact, good sex education leads to responsible sexuality, not to more sex.
Dr. Mason, Dr. Hine said a moment ago that the CDC is not allowed to or prohibits the recommendation of condom use in schools. Would you address that point that she made? The Center for Disease Control.
Yes. The Centers for Disease Control each year puts out about $325 million. And this goes to state and local and community-based organizations. And then there's another $22 million that goes directly to our schools and the school systems. And I believe it is our job to make the funds available and then let people make up their mind at the local level what their message will be. And that's the philosophy of this administration, to provide the funds, see that there aren't total outliers in terms of what happens with that money, but at the local level determine what is the nature of the message that's given to children in school. We feel strongly that nothing should be done at the federal level to undermine parents or youth that may have decided to postpone sexual activity. On the other hand, there's a responsibility realizing that condoms fail, and particularly people who use condoms fail more often than the condom does, that is simply safer than no barrier method, but it is still better to abstain from sexual activity until one is older and mature.
And Congresswoman Schroeder, you believe that the federal message should be more explicit, that it shouldn't just hand out the money and leave it to local communities to decide what to say?
I think it's unconscionable that the federal government is being so passive. And they're being passive because they're afraid of some kind of community reaction. We are sitting on incredible information that a lot of our young people aren't listening. And we need to be telling them very directly what the threat is, how important it is they listen, and how important it is if they don't listen to at least protect themselves.
Let me get it. I just have half a minute, Congressman. I just want to get an answer from Dr. Mason there. Are you being too passive?
I don't believe so at all. I don't agree with earlier statements that this country is behind. It is behind in a number of areas, all related to sexual behavior. But in terms of leadership, in terms of this fight against AIDS, it was United States that first discovered the disease, how it is transmitted. It was here that we first licensed an antibody test to detect the presence of the virus in blood. We've been a leader in almost every phase of this epidemic, even in producing therapies and moving out to test other modes of intervention. And this country has been a leader from the beginning, and it continues to be a leader.
We have to leave it there, Dr. Mason. Thank you, Congresswoman Schroeder, Dr. Hine, and Mr. Gooden in Los Angeles. Thank you all.
Finally tonight, an update on Channel 1, the commercial television newscast aimed at the nation's public school children. Next month, California's school superintendent goes to court to stop one high school district in his state from using the broadcast in its classrooms. Backing the school district with legal help is Whittle Communications, the company that produces the broadcast. At issue is whether public schools should be allowing commercial messages into the classroom. Spencer Michaels of public station KQED in San Francisco has our report.
5 days a week during the school year, the young staff at Whittle Communications' New York Production Center prepares to boil the news of the nation and the world into a 12-minute package. The newscast they produce is called Channel 1. It's a sprightly, fast-paced, graphics-laden broadcast heavy with features and personalities designed to appeal to teenagers.
Here we go. All right, Kath.
Okay.
Energy, you're coming off the Olympics.
Okay. We'll begin tracking each candidate's count as soon as New
Channel 1 is fed to satellite at 3 a.m. every weekday and automatically recorded in 10,000 schools.
President Bush heads across the Atlantic tonight to join other world...
It's played back to an audience its producers claim is 6.3 million students strong. That's nearly 1 out of every 3 12 to 17-year-olds in the United States, even though the newscast is seen by very few students in the country's 2 most populous states, California and New York.
It's not the way your hair is cut.
While the students are watching the newscast, they also watch 2 minutes of commercials.
No Pepsi for me?
These kids are there. They're required to be there. And I don't think it's right to sell access to them to somebody who wants to sell them products. That's not our business.
In fact, that's illegal, claims Bill Honig, California's superintendent of schools. By threatening to cut off state aid to schools using Channel 1, he has kept Whittle out of most California schools so far. Recently, Honig filed suit to get a high school district in San Jose to stop showing Channel 1.
There's a code section that says you can only get reimbursed for educational activities. Watching a commercial is not an educational activity by any stretch of the imagination.
Advertising executive Chris Whittle, the founder of Channel 1, is fighting the lawsuit. His attorneys claim that running commercials is a small price to pay to reach a valuable educational goal. Therefore, they argue the practice is legal.
We are bringing news, programming, and technology to America's schools, and the way we are doing that is we're funding it with advertising. No one has ever tried to put together a national, if you will, Today show for teenagers in America's schools. But a lot of people out there, 10,000 schools, think that's a great idea.
Whittle says advertising is already commonplace in the schools. He disputes Honig's contention that the schools are selling access to kids' minds through Channel 1.
If that were the case, we need to empty all California schools of the following things. Get rid of the newspapers, get rid of the magazines, get rid of all television programming that carries any advertising, get rid of any sponsored materials that have advertising.
The administration at Overfelt High School in San Jose also sees little harm in Channel 1's commercials. Overfelt took a gamble and became the first public high school in California to subscribe to Channel 1. Now this school is the target of Honig's lawsuit. The battle of Overfelt High is not just about preserving the school's state funding. Whittle wants to get a favorable ruling that would allow Channel 1 into every school district here in California, the largest and most lucrative market in the country. That's why he's paying the legal expenses for the school district. His attorneys argue that Bill Honig has overstepped his authority in trying to ban Channel 1, and that any decision to use it should be up to local school boards. Whittle used that argument to win a case before the North Carolina Supreme Court last year.
What the state of California, via Bill Honig, is trying to do is they're trying to say, we want one person to make that call. Well, next week he may decide that CBS shouldn't be in there.
Whittle has provided cash-pressed schools like Overfelt with a package of inducements to carry his newscasts. His company provides a satellite dish that picks up only Whittle programming. In addition, Whittle buys a 19-inch TV set for each classroom and miles of connecting cables. The equipment also allows the school to broadcast its own programs, like messages from the principal.
Good morning. It is required by the Central Coast Section, the CIF, which means California Intergalactic Federation, for me to read to you the sportsmanship policy.
Elias Chamorro, the principal at Overfelt, has led the effort to bring in Whittle at a time when schools across the country can't afford to buy TV equipment themselves.
Our intent is to be at the cutting edge of what's out there and to have as many partnerships with the private sectors as we could have. And we pursue that. Whittle is just one of those partnerships that we have. Probably the best one because it hasn't cost us anything.
What does it cost to run our government for 1 year?
What it does cost Overfelt is that every day each student must watch Channel 1. The contract with Whittle requires that its news broadcast be run once a day. At Overfelt and most high schools, all students see the program at the same time, regardless of what class they are in.
Here in America, we hear a lot about teenage romance, and for that matter, teenage marriage and even pregnancy. In China, where the culture has evolved over thousands of years, even relationships develop more slowly, as Hicks discovered for our look at China Today.
In this 9th grade honors social studies class, the interest level is high. The teacher here usually conducts a discussion about the news.
After a State of the Union address, what happens? What's the next thing that's on TV? All right, hon, what do you mean opposite point? Excellent. Why are you Democrats?
Most of these students like Channel 1.
Well, when we watch it on Channel 1, it's more like on our level instead of like when you watch it on TV, it's like they're trying to talk to the adults.
Yeah.
You say over there that none of your friends
No, friends, they always say that there's just writing notes to their friends or talking because they don't pay attention. I'm the only one that pays attention. It's like the news away from home, you know. It's at school, and most of the time, most of us don't have time to look at the news when we get home from school.
Not all students are so enthused. These youngsters have third-period physical education. Then, when the bell sounds, they file into the weight room to watch the news, with a PE teacher in attendance.
Nation's nuclear stockpile. Yeltsin's remarks came just days in advance of weekend meetings with Western leaders in the United States.
He appeared to be responding to President Bush's State of the Union announcement on cutbacks in U.S. long-range missiles.
There is no discussion, no follow-up.
Over 300,000, roughly, classrooms out there that have Channel 1 in them, and I think to pick one from a weight room is not to pick a very objective sample of what's going on.
We went to some others as well.
Okay. In some schools, it isn't being integrated into the school day at all. In others, it is quite significantly, and that varies from school to school, and will always vary from school to school.
Should you mandate in some way or another, in the contract with the school board or with the individual school, that there be some follow-up?
No, I don't think we should mandate that in the contract. I think we need to be careful about mandates.
On that point, School Superintendent Bill Honig is not so sure. He thinks that if there's going to be commercial TV news for schools, it must be integrated into the curriculum and shown at various times throughout the school day.
Given the commercial nature of it, and given the fact that teachers aren't necessarily social studies teachers that show this, and that the educational purpose isn't paramount, it's mainly to get the TV sets, that it isn't being utilized the proper way. That's why we are so adamant about let the teachers choose when to show this and force them to integrate it into the overall educational program.
No, what would be the opposite of making something higher?
Some teachers resent the fact that they are pressured to show Channel 1. Barbara Rickugler, who teaches English as a second language, is one of those who has joined Honig's lawsuit against the school district. She debated the TV show with some colleagues.
Why do I have to teach social studies? I think it's great if they want to teach current events. But why is it being taught in English classes, in art classes, in PE classes? There is no follow-up. There's no accountability. There's no evaluation of what they're learning.
There can be if you want to put it into your curriculum.
Exactly, and that would mean extra work, which I'm not getting paid for and which is not in my field.
Ron Cueva heads the Social Studies Department.
We're going to have a test on Tuesday, and there's going to be current event questions on my test. I think it's important for students to know that. And, Barbara says, gee, it's out of her field, but, you talk to the PE teachers, it's out of their field, and they say, no, this is a good program. Matter of fact, 85% of our teachers on our staff think this is a good program, and we don't have 85% of our teachers teaching social studies.
Teachers here also debate the educational value of Channel 1.
The news portion is so fragmented. It's constantly broken up. You get 2 seconds of this, 2 seconds that, a little picture of a graph, one person talking, a little intro lead-in, and you're just like, wow, it's like scrambled eggs.
They covered the State of the Union address. They went over some of the things that happened. My students, they know about the State of the Union address. They watched that. They saw it on Whittle. Without Whittle, it would have been just something they had heard about but really didn't know much about.
Tomorrow, Mark looks at land for peace and other issues at stake.
Since Channel 1 first went on the air 3 years ago, the results of university studies on its educational value have been mixed. Some say students who watch it learn from it. But this one from researchers in North Carolina says commercial video news programs produced for students by themselves have no significant impact on student knowledge of current events. However, when teachers integrate the programs into lessons, student knowledge improves.
Maybe his face exploded.
Like
what? You should do something about your zits? I don't know.
Still, the commercials remain the most controversial aspect of Channel 1. Spanish teacher Doris Reynolds is another plaintiff in the lawsuit.
I have a problem with the students thinking that I endorse these products just simply because I'm there allowing them to watch it. You can't get away from TV. I think there should be some place in the planet, in the nation, where you can go and not see a TV.
The commercials are so far a commercial success. Channel 1 has been sold out since it began.
Are you making any money?
Yes.
How much?
We're a private company. We don't announce our profits, but a good, solid profit. In fact, Channel 1 made money in its first year. We have extremely high expectations of Channel 1 over the next 5 to 7 years. We expect we will be in 70 to 80% of all middle and high schools in the United States.
Some ad agencies, however, say they are not sure that advertising on Channel 1 is effective and worth the cost. Agency media director Judy Courtney has looked at the ad studies.
The results of the Whittle research that I saw was inconclusive. In some cases, there was an increase in awareness. In other cases, there wasn't. In some cases, there was an increase in purchase intent, which is very important because we're helping our clients sell product. In some cases, there wasn't.
Such confusion is borne out in the breezeways of Overfeld High School. Many students say they ignore the commercials, but who knows what seeps in.
You can talk over commercials. Yeah. No, not in this today.
What do they advertise?
Just commercials about candies and gum. Mostly Pepsi. Yeah, Pepsi. That's mostly all the commercials about Pepsi and bubble gum.
So you do watch the commercials?
Yeah.
What about the idea of watching commercials in school?
You watch them at home all day long. It's nothing different.
This spring, a California court will decide whether watching commercials in school is all that different from watching them at home. The decision could influence the future of commercial news programming in the schools, not just in California, but in other states like New York, where the same debate is raging.
Again, the main stories of this Tuesday. Russian President Boris Yeltsin won parliamentary support to continue his radical reforms for at least 3 more months. The World Court turned down Libya's request to bar United Nations sanctions, which take effect tomorrow. And retail sales in the United States fell in March following strong gains in January and February. Good night, Robin.
Good night, Judy. That's the NewsHour tonight, and we'll be back tomorrow night. I'm Robert MacNeil. Good night.
Funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by PepsiCo. PepsiCo. Part of helping the world live and communicate better is keeping it well informed. That's why funding for the NewsHour is also provided by AT&T. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and viewers like you.
Follow the work of Dr. Dean Ornish, who treats chronic heart disease with diet, meditation, and exercise. Watch Avoiding the Surgeon's Knife on Nova, next at 8, here on OPB.
Video cassettes of the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour are available from PBS Video. Call 1-800-328-PBS-1. This is PBS.
All this overpopulation problem, it's simple. Please spay or neuter your pet. If you do, then sweet puppies like this won't have to beg for a chance at life.